On a lonely planet slowly spinning its way to damnation, amid the incompetence and unpreparedness of lesser space programs, one team stands resilient against the herds, putting their lives on the line to aid those who were previously unaware of the quick-save option. Yes, it's the incredible adventures of Jebediah and his crack team of Kerbinauts. They are the Blunderbirds, saving the Kerbin race one stranded explorer at a time.
Okay, so you know how this goes now. That's the intro, and this is a series in which we rescue other people's Kerbals from different planets. So in this episode, we have Nihilistic Nacho. What a username. He's left, unfortunately has left Jebediah stranded at the bottom of the Mohole, which for those of you that aren't aware is a big hole on Moho, hence the creative name Mohole. But it's quite a hard place to return from and get to, I suppose. So this is kind of made doubly hard by the fact that we actually have to go and recover someone from the very bottom, and to make things even more complicated, he has no monopropellant or any real means of ascending further than where he is. So it's going to be a fun challenge. That's why I didn't really have any plans to make any more Blunderbirds this year, but I saw this one on Reddit. Well, I kind of, by the way, this is the rocket. I feel like I should introduce that, but there's nothing special about it really. But when I kind of came up with this series, there are a few places I wanted to specifically focus on in certain episodes. I'm not going to say what the other things are, because I feel like then people might start to deliberately leave Kerbal's, air quotes, stranded on the subreddit in the hopes that I feature their thing. And I want this series to be organic, you know. Like I've seen a lot of like Blunderbirds requests on the subreddit, and they look very. The cynic in me sees that and thinks they probably just did this to get a shout out, because like the flag next to their lander has a gaming channel logo on it. And I don't know. I'm just very cynical about this sort of thing, and I don't know. I like having the more natural ones. Maybe this was a deliberate attempt at baiting a Blunderbirds episode, because it seems it's kind of a weird place to strand Jeb with no monopropellant on top of that. But whatever. Like I say, when I started this series, there are a few places I wanted to actually feature at some point in the series. So one of them was Eve. Eve was kind of one of the big ones I wanted to feature, because Eve is I'd say Eve is probably the hardest place to rescue Kerbals from. Tylo was another one I really wanted to feature in this series, because again, Tylo is almost as hard as Eve when it comes to rescuing Kerbals from it. So those two places, just because they're very difficult, and it would be good to kind of serve as a sort of soft tutorial so you can see how it's done. And then the Mohole was one of the places I wanted to rescue Kerbals from as well. And a Duna, I wanted to have an excuse to do a Duna and Mun SSTO, so we got those out of the way. So I think, well, I'd like to at least visit each planet at least once in this series. But maybe I should just talk about what's on screen for a second, actually, just glancing at the computer monitor. Just deorbiting this booster here. We have enough fuel in it to land it safely, and so we landed it safely. You don't really need to see that though, because I guess you kind of know what that would look like. But don't worry, it landed. And there it is in its kind of in-space glory. I was going to say sort of final glory, but I guess it's final glory, well, like its main. This is Blunderbird 7. Just getting away. I don't know what I was trying to say there, but this is it in orbit, an ultra long range vessel, as you can see from all of those tanks. We have, I think, about over 10,000 meters per second of delta V, which is really almost overkill for Moho. I say almost overkill because Moho is very difficult to get to, and it's quite hard to do it efficiently, but you can theoretically go to Moho with a lot less. But I don't know, I kind of just didn't want to have the stress of having to think about conserving energy and things. Like when I'm not doing an SSTO mission, I like to just brute force it, really. I don't like having to plan on a budget, because like, if I'm going to do a budget, I may as well make it an SSTO, and when it's a rocket, there's no need. Well, there is. I guess there's a level of impressiveness if you are doing it efficiently, but I don't care. I feel like it's impressive enough that we're going to the bottom of the Mohole. I didn't really feel the need to try and make life difficult for myself by adding more and more handicaps to it. So yeah, not a lot really to say. We obviously waited for a Moho transfer window and then burned. If you want an actual tutorial for getting to Moho, I would probably point you to, I think I covered it in the Mohole base video, which is the only other video I've done about the Mohole. I've made another video as well about just Moho itself, but that was a music video. That was before kind of I started doing commentaries and things. So I think one of those I kind of covered the basics of getting to Moho. So in this case, I I waited for a transfer window, but in general you don't often need to be honest. Now, I did make a small error here.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Yes, the reason my ship kind of spaghettified and exploded all at once was because I've been using the mod Better Time Warp. That's how I've been doing some of the burns in this video. You may have noticed that it's been Physics Time Warp times 10, not just locked to Physics Time Warp times 4 at the maximum. And that's just the mod Better Time Warp, but unfortunately if you try and do it any faster than sort of times 10, it can sometimes cause things to glitch out and explode, like you just saw, so gotta be careful if using this mod. But as you can see, the burn to circularize and capture at Mohole was ridiculously long, and it's just so much more tolerable when you can have a faster physics time warp setting. So for Mohole missions, or any mission really that warrants very long burns, Better Time Warp is your friend, because you can have faster than times 4 physics. And for those of you that don't know, because I guess a lot of people don't know, because I get this comment on pretty much every video, if you want to do time warp, you don't need mods for this, but it only goes up to times 4. If you want to do time warp during a burn, you just hold down Alt, and then, you know, the full stop and comma keys to tweak the time warp speed, in case you didn't know that. But anyway, we are now circularized in a polar orbit. Obviously it has to be polar because we need to be passing over the Mohole, which is at the pole. Well, there's one at both poles, but in this case I think it's at the North Pole, so I don't know why this is particularly relevant, but here we go. Opening the service bay, and you can see our 2 landers in here. I'll talk more about why there's 2 later on, but for now we can just toggle the fuel tanks. Make sure they're all enabled, then we can just burn. Make sure you're controlling from the probe core as well if you choose to download this craft from the description. But yeah, I guess it's kind of a niche craft really. I mean, unless you actually need to do this mission yourself, you'd probably just be better off designing your own ships, to be honest. But hey, I guess you could use the, you could add like your own Apollo-style lander. I guess these landers do work for non-Mohole diving, like just going to the surface, but they have a lot of delta V them for that purpose alone, and they don't have any instrumentation on them or any kind of useful thing. So I don't really know what I'm trying to say with this, but the craft file is in the description if you want it. So without further ado, I suppose we can just start decelerating down the hole. I had to quick save a few times here because unfortunately Jebediah kept on glitching out through the floor and then exploding. So yeah, it took a few attempts. If you see some weird cuts, that's because I had to quick load to get Jebediah back into the world of the living. But yeah, like, I don't know. I think it's just the collision. Oh well, physics are known to be very, very glitchy in the Mohole. There you go, quick save there. Physics are very, very glitchy in the Mohole. I think Jebediah's head kept on like sort of vibrating through the wall, and then you just start to fall into the center of the planet. It was very weird. But here we are. I didn't take too many attempts, luckily. So this is quite a short lander because I thought I could be able to transfer Jeb through the fuel tanks, but he wasn't quite close enough. So I kind of have to do this sort of spazzy walk, trying to hit the board button when it appeared, and I kept missing and hitting aim camera. With a few more attempts, there we go. So beautifully graceful boarding procedure set. There are probably better ways of designing this lander, but you know, sometimes simple is the best. And obviously now he's boarded, we can throttle up the engine. Now, some of you may be wondering at this point, we clearly don't have enough delta V at this point. Like, we've only got less than 400 meters per second, and for those of you that don't know, to get into a stable Mohole orbit from the surface, normal surface that is, not let alone the Mohole, it takes about 870 meters per second to circularize, so we don't have anywhere near enough delta V. But don't worry, that was never the plan. We're just going to land Jebediah here and use the second lander from the mothership to actually go and pick him up. But until the other one arrives, we have a few things to do here. For one, I actually, although this isn't, normally I plant a Blunderbird's flag, but obviously this is someone else's Kerbal, but we packed a Blunderbird's flag inside that lander, inside the save file hacking, but so he can plant the Blunderbird's flag, just so we can say, because I remember one episode, I didn't plant the Blunderbird's flag, and a lot of people got really upset and emotionally distraught, so I'm very sorry for any trauma I may have caused anyone. So from now on, we're going to be planting the Blunderbird's flag in every episode going forwards. But digressions aside, here we are, deorbiting the second lander. So the reason I went with 2 landers in the end was because I needed a lander that was small enough for Jeb to board inside the Mohole. As you saw, it was very difficult for him to board that very, very tiny one anyway. And I felt like if I was just going to have the one lander that had enough fuel to, I guess I could have had a multi-stage lander, but I didn't want to be dropping any stages on top of Jebediah's head. So, and it needed to, like I say, it needed to be very small for him to be able to sort of squeeze onto the command seat. So the way I did plan out a few different lander designs, but in terms of the logistics and just ease of use and I guess getting it to work in the first place. It just was much easier to have 2 separate landers, one to just get Jebediah out of the Mohole, and then a second one to actually get him back into orbit, and obviously take him to the ship as well. And getting him on the ship actually was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, because well, we can talk about that closer to the time, but some of you may have figured out why it would be very difficult to get Jebediah back into the crew cabin. But in case you haven't realised that yet, then don't worry, we can talk about that closer to the time. But now, my friends, it is time to interrupt this episode of the Blunderbirds to bring you this message. Hi, I'm a rocket scientist, and I have just one question for you. Does your rocket suck? Can't get it up? Well, folks, I have the answer. Just add more boosters. More boosters. But how will I remember to add more boosters, Mr. Science Man? That's a good question, layperson that we didn't hire. It's by buying this t-shirt. And never again will you forget that you can just add more boosters. Just visit this website. Hurry, while stocks last. Anyway, I guess now that's done and you've unsubscribed, we can move back to what we were doing at hand. I kind of waited for the mothership to pass just above us, just past us actually. Some people might be confused about this, because if you're doing like a rendezvous around Kirby and you want to be launching quite a bit ahead of the thing you want to rendezvous with, but obviously there's no atmosphere on Mohole, so we can accelerate very quickly. And the way this works, we're actually sort of coming underneath it, so our path is shorter, so we'll be travelling sort of relatively faster. So we want to be launching slightly behind it, and then we'll catch up quite easily. And there we go. This second lander has a lot more delta V than it really needed, because I like just being able to dock fast. I don't really find docking too efficiently all that fun. I find let's just get it done over and done with as quickly as we can. So the big challenge here was Jebediah has no monopropellant inside his jetpack. So I don't know why I keep calling it a jetpack, because it's not a jetpack, but you know what I mean, right? The RCS pack. So I kind of had to sort of get him as close to the door as possible, the crew hatch as possible, and then kind of move the ship to be close enough to Jebediah that I could just press the B button and he would board. So that's what I'm kind of doing here, because I have literally zero. You can't even use the SAS. Well, you know they've got the SAS button on Kerbal. So you can't control them at all without the RCS pack having fuel. So he's literally just a sort of a sitting duck, a floating duck. I guess a floating duck would be something in water usually, but you know what I mean. I can't control it, so I had to just kind of carefully navigate the ship, try and get him to be hovering over the door, and then you can just press the B button or hit F to make him grab onto the ship, and then sort of climb him up to get to the hatch. I really just deorbit the lander there, because I kept accidentally switching to it and it was getting on my nerves. But yeah, we're going to gently burn it with a nuclear engine. This was made harder by the fact that we don't have any monopropellant tanks on this mothership, but it doesn't really matter too much. When you've done rendezvous as many times as I have, you don't really end up needing monopropellant. Oh, there we go. So we nearly had the board just then, and then remember that crew cabin is actually full. So I quickly had to transfer Valentina, or I guess any of them, into the hitchhiker compartment below the command pod, and then we're going to quickly try and burn up. And just at this point, I was just basically spamming the B button, and there we go. Boy, I don't know if you saw it just appear very briefly there, but regardless, we've now got Jebediah on board. So that was actually one of the more frustrating parts. The most frustrating part, without doubt, was actually landing the lander inside the Mohole. It was just very, very glitchy. Maybe I'll include a blunder reel in the description, but I probably won't, because I had to move the camera around quite a lot. It was rather nauseating for a viewer to watch. So, but rest assured, there were a lot of instances where Jebediah just spontaneously died and just disintegrated. So yeah, so I'm not going to be doing our transfer window from Mohole itself. We're just going to get into a sun orbit and then do our transfer to Kerbin from there, because Mohole's gravity is so small, the O-berth effect is very, very minimal. And as you can see, I've got over 4,000 meters per second of delta V remaining. We have a stupid amount of fuel. We didn't really need to worry about efficiency at all by this point. Our thrust to weight ratio is pretty abysmal, but it's not really that important, because we don't need to be landing anywhere and we don't need to be escaping from any significant sphere of influence. So yeah, I kind of got our Kerbin encounter using 2 burns. There's this burn here to kind of get ourselves into that eccentric sun orbit, so that our orbit crosses Kerbin's orbit, so we can actually get an encounter. And then we're doing a second burn. You can kind of see the other maneuver node there. I didn't kind of show the entire process of making those maneuver nodes, because I feel like it's not really that interesting to watch, and I've already done quite countless videos that were actually done efficiently and planned out well. Yeah, I think that kind of show how to make maneuver nodes over long distances. If you wanted to I feel like this is not the best video for a tutorial, really. I've not done things very efficiently. Like, I think I think I did a pretty good job of the Mohole landing itself, but everything else in this mission was not very optimal. So I wouldn't call this a tutorial by any stretch of the imagination, and I think most of you by this point kind of know how to make maneuver nodes. I don't really know why I'm getting so caught up on this topic, but I kind of have just sort of rambled over the entirety of that burn. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching that, because I didn't describe any of it, but one final burn. Obviously, we're going to be getting our Kerbal encounter, but it'd be nice to actually, pass into its atmosphere. We're going to be coming in very, very fast, as I said earlier, to get the most efficient encounters, or, encounters that your actual, for Kerbin's case at least, your re-entry speed will be as slow as possible. You want to be having it so your orbit is kind of tangent to Kerbin's, in that the edge of the curve kisses the curve of Kerbin's orbit, whereas here we're basically going directly across it. So our re-entry speed is going to be very, very high, but worry not, we have a very, very big heat shield, the inflate. Look at that, we're nearly 4,000 meters per second on the very edge of its sphere of influence. We're going to be coming in very, very hot. So we can just detach that stage just there and then inflate this heat shield. Luckily, the inflatable heat shield is very, very powerful. So, and it does a perfectly fine job of covering up the... Hope my voice wasn't just drowned out just then by all those explosions. We got a nice firework display just then. But it does a more than adequate job of covering up all the command pods and things. The ablative heat shields wouldn't have really provided enough cover for the command pods, because it's quite a relatively tall structure we're re-entering right now. But the inflatable heat shield did more than a perfect job. And with Moho, often ablative heat shields can get destroyed if you kind of go any close to the sun. If you go closer to the sun than Moho, the ablative shield can get destroyed, and I wasn't quite sure how inefficient I would make my mission. So I'm like, let's just go with the inflatable one just to make this vision completely foolproof. And obviously, if you wanted to do this yourself, you may not execute it. Not that I executed it very well by any stretch of the imagination, but if you do it even less effectively, it would be nice to have that fallback of having an inflatable shield where you don't really need to worry about it getting destroyed by the sun. But there we go, all touchdown. Jebediah can breathe easy once again, and well, I guess that pretty much wraps this up, to be honest. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Blunderbirds. Probably the last one of 2017. Hope you enjoyed. Obviously, we're going to be... It's not like the last episode ever, but I don't really know why I mentioned that specific detail. But anyway, on screen, top left is the music video version of this video. Top right is that time I built a base inside the Mohole. Bottom left is just my most recent upload, and bottom right was specially selected for you by YouTube's algorithm. So I hope you enjoy those videos, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.